WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM's Master of Business Administration is designed to accommodate the career needs of professionals across a variety of work organizations. More information at business.udmercy.edu.
Live from WDET in Detroit, it's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the program, we'll hear from Black Tech Saturdays as they talk about a new Black Tech Saturdays as they talk about an event coming up this Saturday. Actually, we'll dive into diversifying Black technology.
But first on the Metro, Democrats are back in power in Lansing, regaining their slim two-seat majority in the State House thanks to two special elections in the 13th and 25th districts. Meanwhile, Republicans are setting their strategy to try and retake the majority this fall, pointing to their fundraising numbers ahead of the November election. So what does this mean for the Democrats' policy agenda in Lansing? Later in the show, we'll hear from State House Republican Bill Schuette about how his party's plan to win back the House. But to start the conversation and learn more about the Dems' agenda, we're joined by Lauren Gibbons, who covers state politics and policy for Bridge, Michigan. Lauren, welcome back to the Metro.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Happy to have you here because as the Dems again get that majority, there seems to be much less time now than what we may have heard from Gretchen Whitmer as her proposed agenda for Democrats this year. With the reduced time and the election coming up, what is the strategy for the Dems now that they have the majority once again in the House?
So from both chambers, both the House and Senate are really laser focused right now on getting the budget done. And that's something that the legislature has to get done every year. It's got to be done by October 1st. But the goal in recent cycles has been to get it done by summer to make it easier for schools and local governments and others who are getting funding from the state to prepare their own budgets ahead of that fall deadline. So that's the main priority right now. And when we ask, there's a couple of other cats and dogs, but not much else. That's the main thing they're trying to do. And as you alluded to, one of the main reasons for that is pretty soon they've got to turn their attention to getting reelected.
Yeah, and I want to get into a little bit later how that plays into maybe getting some of these policy proposals passed. But let's just recap from the State of the State. Governor Whitmer laying out her agenda mentioned things like building more housing, a new caregiver tax credit, free pre-K for all, free community college for all Michigan graduates. But she also knew that the Dems didn't have a majority at the time she was making that State of the State announcement. So are these things still on the table, or what's it looking like right now from their position?
Yeah, so during that State of the State address, a lot of those priorities were budget priorities, essentially. Because that was something that by April they knew they were getting that majority back, most likely, and so the governor really focused a lot of her priorities on things that she was hoping to get through the budget cycle. Now, are those things still on the table? Yes. Is it clear whether all of those priorities are going to make it through the budget process? Well, no, because some of those initial marquee things like the free preschool, the free community college, those were walked back in both House and Senate budgets. Some of the other governor's priorities, including a proposed rebate for buying new vehicles, additional rebates for buying new electric vehicles. That's not in the legislative budgets right now, but it's still very early in the process. And so as the lawmakers and the governor's office negotiate these things over the coming weeks and months, we could see some of those top priorities of the governor slip back into the budget at the end of the day.
You mentioned that the calculation may change as lawmakers work to start getting reelected. We're getting back into campaign season ahead of the fall. But for folks who might not be as familiar, especially, what is the lean between the amount of time it takes for you to get reelected versus working in Lansing? I mean, is this something where we just expect as they start ramping that up, there's just no time for it? Is there a balance? For folks who might not see it, Why does election season mean that we can't get quite as much done in Lansing, or wouldn't expect to?
There typically is a balance. It's not like lawmakers aren't going to ever be in Lansing after the summer. But it is a really big calculation when it comes to, when it's this slim of a majority. The House has two more seats. House Democrats have two more seats than Republicans do. And there's a lot of competitive seats all across the state. And those are going to be areas where, candidates are going to have to spend a ton of time back in their districts, knocking on doors and telling people what they've been doing, or, on the Republican side, in some cases, trying to look at opportunities for flips. So it is going to be extremely competitive, and it's going to take up a lot of people's time. So during the summer, I would expect to see a lot of that ramp up. But yeah, in the fall, once you get so close to the election cycle, it can often be difficult at times to take difficult votes right before voters are going to decide whether to put people back in for 2 years. So that also factors into the equation as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you bring up there as we speak to Lauren Gibbons, who covers state politics and policy for Bridge, Michigan. But Lauren, you did mention some of these competitive seats. It's a slim 2-seat majority. I mean, Dems won the majority because of narrow wins in places like Traverse City, Sterling Heights, Wyandotte, St. Joseph, Battle Creek, Mount Clemens, you name them. So when you think about these close positions, how does that factor into the voting pattern that you've seen from some of these reps? I mean, are they causing a little bit of difficulty in getting some of this stuff passed? Do they have concerns about going back to their constituents as they have these tough battles ahead and maybe a little bit more risk averse when it comes to lawmaking? How has that affected the ability of Democrats to get things done in Lansing, if at all?
I think overall the strategy of the Democratic caucus has been to, vote out, especially in 2023, when they had that full majority for the whole year, voting out Democratic priorities. And a lot of those in competitive districts have been going back to their districts and saying, hey, well, we repealed right to work, or we protective reproductive rights, and a lot of things that really matter to Democrats as a whole. Now they're going to have to, convince voters this is really good for our district, but also really good for the state. And then Republicans, on the other hand, especially in these competitive areas, there are areas that both parties are going to be looking at potentially flipping. Like there's some, there's Republican holding some competitive seats, particularly in Oakland County is a big area that Democrats are looking at to potentially secure flip opportunities. But yeah, in terms of the Democrats having to defend their record, I think you're seeing a lot of them point to how much House Democrats got done in 2023. And, hope that that's what voters are looking for.
Are there any bipartisan opportunities that you're aware of or things that we think might get passed before we head into November? One thing I'm thinking of is just coming out of committee, a bipartisan bill on film incentives that had sign-in from both Democrat and Republican that led the committee. Is that something that we could see a vote on, or are there any things that you're seeing that have that bipartisan feel?
It really depends on ultimately what leadership decides to do. Film incentives was one of those. It's a lot of interest on both sides. Both in terms of interest from supporters, but also from detractors. That's an interesting one. It's good to note that the Senate actually passed out a bunch of bills that the House technically could take up if they decide to do so, including cracking down on payday lending, the governor's proposal to create a prescription drug affordability board. Auto no fault is something that the Senate took up as well. So there's a lot of things that the legislature could do. Now, whether that does end up happening ultimately really depends on what leadership decides. I think another area with potential bipartisan crossover is economic development. Some lawmakers are really interested in changing how the state looks at corporate incentives and what is required of businesses angling for state assistance in that regard. So there's some things besides the budget that could come up. It just really depends on, what lawmakers think they have time for.
All right, we'll keep an eye on it with you there. Lauren Gibbons, covering state politics and policy for Bridge, Michigan. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. It's Nick Austin. I'm Tia Graham. Coming up, we'll hear from a Republican representative about how that party plans to win back the state house in November.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Last Tuesday, the filing deadline for state house candidates passed. And that now means 110 House seats are up for grabs as Democrats and Republicans grapple for power in the next election. On Mishmash, WDET's Shayna Roth and Gonward News Service's Alethea Caspin sat down with Republican Representative Bill Schuette to discuss the Republican Party's electoral chances this year. They begin by talking about the seats that could swing from Democratic to Republican control.
The House this year is really up for grabs. The Democrats currently hold it by a very slim majority. And of course, Republicans are eager to get back their majority in the House. What districts do you see as being the most competitive?
Well, you're right. It's, the House is certainly up for grabs. And if you look at the 2022 election, which was, unfortunately a tough year for the Republicans, it was still an incredibly close election at the state House level. We were, 1,400 votes away from holding the gavel right now. And there were 7 seats, Shayna, that Republicans lost by less than 2,000 votes. And, I think we're shaping up to have a much more competitive general election environment in this in 2024. And, I would start with looking at those 7 seats that we lost by that painfully close of a margin. But I'd also look at, between 2016 and 2020, there are 10 seats currently held by Democrats that Donald Trump won. And when you factor in that the House Republicans have overperformed the top of the ticket by 9 points as much in last election, we're going to have a lot of opportunities to go on offense and retake the gavel this November.
So former President Trump, he inspires a lot of feelings on both sides of the equation. How are you going to counsel candidates to, deal with the former president at the top of the ticket? Do they embrace him? Do they talk about him? Do they avoid him? What's the strategy there?
I think, this is going to be an election about were you better off under the presidency of President Trump, or were you better off under Joe Biden? And I think people can, look at how their savings are eroded under Joe Biden. They can, look at how their paychecks are going less and less far at the grocery store or on their energy bills under Democrat leadership. And they can look at the crisis on our southern border. And the contrast is clear. And I think that's why the top of the ticket dynamics, a weak, failed presidency of Joe Biden compared with Donald Trump, voters are going to choose Donald Trump. And you've seen that reflected in the polling. I think you'll see that in our messages. I'd also say, Trump's base shows up in general elections when he's on the ballot. And a lot of the times you get the negatives of a personality like President Trump, who's fairly polarizing. You get the negatives no matter if he's on the ballot or not. The base turnout, you really you get more often when he's on the ballot. So I think it'll be a positive for us across the state and across the ticket.
Do you think, the former president can still be a positive for state house candidates, say in a district like the 103rd in the Traverse City area where you want to unseat an incumbent Dem, and in the 81st in Grand Rapids where it's an open seat where the Democrat holds it now and it's, clearly a target for you guys? Can Trump be a positive in seats like that where he is unpopular?
So again, that's where I think the strength of the House Republican campaign operation of our candidates that we have filed here on the deadline is so strong because, our candidates, they fit their districts like a glove. And in seats like Traverse City and in seats in the Grand Rapids area, we have candidates who have decades of community experience. They have their own local brand or brand. Sorry for the bad pun there. In their districts that reflect the types of communities and voters will be willing to go and vote for those candidates. You look on the other side of the aisle. You look at the Democrats. They're a monolithic. Some of their most liberal members, some of their most far left progressive members are in some of those most progressive or in the most swing seats, the most toss up seats. And I think that's where, when you really drill down to that state house level, you're going to see the strength of Republican candidates shine.
So would you say that the strategy is more a message of anti-Biden as opposed to pro-Trump, or are you trying to find more of a balance than that?
I would say that the message is that Michiganders were better off under Republican leadership, whether that was in a growing, booming economy under President Trump, or with Republican leadership in our state legislature. There's not a time when I'm knocking on doors in my own district of Midland, if I'm downriver or if I'm on the west side of the state. People are frustrated with their energy and heating bills, and Michigan Democrats have only made that worse. So we're going to have the opportunity to provide contrast of positive policy, but also I don't know many people who are happy with the weak and frail presidency of Joe Biden.
That was Shana Roth and Alethea Caspin speaking with Republican Representative Bill Schuette on Mishmash, WDET's State Politics Podcast. You can find the latest episode of Mishmash wherever you find your podcasts. This is The Metro.
It is The Metro on 101.9 WDET, as you just heard from Tia Graham. I am Nick Austin, and as we transition to something that is touching us locally but involves international politics, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is trying to convince Israelis to consider a future Palestinian state, but many in Israel are more opposed to it than ever. NPR's Michelle Kellerman spoke with the minority of Israeli citizens pushing for a two-state solution.
In the basement of a small apartment building, activists with a group called Peace Now understand they're on the margins of Israeli society. In times of war, the most radical views dominate discourse, says Mauricio Lapchik.
For example, with a two-state solution, a political solution, is exactly what Hamas would not want to accept, because their vision is a religious, Muslim, radical state from the river to the sea. And the vision of the radicals from our government and from our society is a Jewish supremacy state from the river to the sea.
His task is to get people talking about a middle ground.
We are here to say that at the end of the day, if we want to live in security and freedom, both the peoples, Israelis and Palestinians, will need to understand that the only solution is that, giving Israel the right to exist and protect themselves, and giving the Palestinians the right to self-determination and also to protect and the security that they deserve.
Palestinians in the government in the West Bank are furious with the U.S. for vetoing a UN Security Council resolution to upgrade their status at the UN. Most Israelis don't even understand why the world is talking about a Palestinian state right now, says Dalia Shenlin, a public opinion expert who's written a book called The Crooked Timber of Democracy in Israel.
People are talking about it because they're totally incredulous that the rest of the world is talking about it, and they think it's absolutely bizarre. They think it's completely like happening on another planet.
She says only about a quarter of Jewish Israelis support the idea of creating a Palestinian state. The number is closer to 70% of Palestinians with Israeli citizenship. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has never supported a Palestinian state, and he and others now argue that the October 7th attack was a sign of what a state would look like. That's according to Shenlin.
That's not me saying that. Okay, that is the kind of things that you're hearing from the Israeli right wing, which is a vast portion of Israeli society. You know, the leadership, the government, and over half of all Israelis, and certainly over 60% of Jewish Israelis think in that way.
Lopchik of Peace Now is looking beyond this current government in Israel, which he says is more focused on expanding Jewish settlements in the West Bank and fighting, as he puts it, a perpetual war with the Palestinians. He thinks the U.S. should continue to impose sanctions on Israeli extremists in the West Bank because that is starting to at least have an impact on public discourse at home.
People finally started to talk about settler violence, settler terrorism. I prefer to use that term because that's what it is. It is not only violence, it is terrorism, and it should be condemned and avoided and stopped.
Peace Now is trying to get more Israelis out to protest, but Israeli protest movements are all over the map. There are right-wing Israelis who want to resettle Gaza and block aid to Palestinians. Others are out in force to demand a hostage deal. In those protests, some Israelis do talk about the need for peace. A survivor of the October 7th attack, Iris Ganor, says when she was in a safe house that day, fearing her life, she wrote a letter.
It was supposed to be read by my daughters, and it ended with the words, "Do not seek revenge in my name, seek peace." I'm still there. I believe that we have to find a way to settle. And it's not only our problem, it's the whole West world's problem. To find a way to tame the extremists all around.
Israelis and Palestinians don't have to love each other, she says, but they need to find a way to coexist.
That was NPR's Michelle Kellerman investigating the possibility of a two-state solution in Israel and Palestine.
This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. That was Nick Austin. I'm Tia Graham. And coming up, we'll discuss Black Tech Saturdays in Detroit and the ways that organization is trying to make the tech space more inclusive. You stay right there.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Now, the tech field is continuing to expand its reach, especially as more industries adopt automation, robotics, and AI, just to name a few. But these technologies didn't create themselves. They were designed by people, and often those who have more resources and access to technology than the average American get to dictate what these technologies do. Black Tech Saturdays, created by Johnnie and Alexa Turnage, is an organization in Detroit with the goal of promoting diversity and inclusion in the tech industry. To talk about their mission, how they've grown, and what the tech field is, we're joined by Johnnie Turnage. He is the co-founder and creator of Black Tech Saturdays. Johnnie, welcome to the Metro.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so how did Black Tech Saturdays get started, and when exactly did it all go from hosting events to actually having this organization?
Yeah, so honestly, today is the 1-year birthday of the first Black Tech Saturday.
Congratulations. Happy birthday.
Thank you. We started, it was honestly like 4 or 5 of us tech founders just trying to help each other apply for grants, figure out each other's companies and get a little bit further. And one day we were like, I think there should be other people here, because we kept finding out people were texting us like, I want to come. And then we opened it up last year, April 29th, 30 people showed up.
Wow.
But it was the people who showed up that was interesting. We had the DOD, we had tech founders, we had tech talent. I was like, I didn't know there were this many people, and none of you were the people who I already met. And as we kept having it, we doubled until now we average kind of like 500-600 people come out. The last couple of weeks we spiked up past 1,000, and we bring out industry leaders, people who can teach workshops, just different trainings on how to get further in tech, even people who are hiring, just to help all of us see ourselves in tech, and it's been a blessing.
And how did it feel, especially starting out just a year ago? Congratulations once again. A year ago, and you started with 30 people, and you just watched it grow exponentially pretty much. So what does it tell you about the community, especially here amongst minority tech industries?
Yeah. One, it breaks the kind of the myth. We all thought we were the only one. Almost every black founder or black tech person who comes in the room goes, I thought it was just me. Where are all these people coming from who have these extensive careers? And there are a lot of Detroiters who are all over the country doing amazing things. By us having an event on Saturday, when they come into town, we go, oh, we got executives running some of the biggest stuff. So that pride and excitement for like what we're creating, people seeing themselves in it. But there was like, I think week 3 or 4, I told my wife, I was like, I think we have to go back to the charts. There's way too many people showing up. We should open our minds to who else is interested, who's curious, who's tinkering. And we kind of retooled the program to figure out how can we give not only that tech founder, tech talent, but people who are tech curious trying to figure out, well, where do they fit in this whole tech grand scheme of everything? And it's been a blessing. People have started to get 6 and 7 figure deals. People are getting jobs. I'm also seeing the number of companies who showed up who were like, I didn't even have an idea. And now they've come into that room and they built something and gotten funded for it. And it's like, yeah, we just needed a little bit more access and exposure. And you see us start to just create at speeds that are like amazing.
Yeah. And as we're talking right now, Johnnie, and we're talking about tech.
Yeah.
It's such an umbrella term. What are we talking about when we talk about tech?
So tech is this very broad facing thing, which I think of as tech is just solving a problem at scale. How can you do something over and over again? Technology touches everything in our lives, whether it be music, finance, art, even as we're seeing this boom with AI, it's reminding us tech can touch even more than we thought. My cousin's a chef. She's like, I put my recipes in ChatGPT and I have it see, well, what if I don't have this ingredient? How can I make this? And I was like, oh, wow. I've watched somebody create all their standard operating processes using AI. Instead of writing it by hand, I'm like, well, a small business owner just saved themselves 12 hours. We've taught a couple of nonprofit directors how to use it just to help with, like, you got a small team, here's how you can help and like give everybody a little bit of that peace of mind back because you're not stressed trying to do every single thing. So tech is technology. You've got apps and websites. You've got hard tech, what they're doing with mobility and building like automated scooters and cars, even these electric vehicles. And as Detroit and Michigan try to center themselves in the tech conversation, a lot of what we're doing here is I'm like, because tech touches everything, because Detroit creates like no other, I just want all of us to know whatever that idea you've had on the shelf, we can use technology to bring it to life because you don't have to be a technical founder. You don't have to know how to code and build it all with your hands. You just need a really good idea, the energy to do it. And trust me, there's somebody in the room who can help you bring it to life.
And I think about this, and I think about the accessibility based on AI and all the things that it's allowing people to do now, and the ways that it's allowing people to bridge into and jump into different areas and aspects of technology. I think about we're possibly seeing, I guess, I don't want to say a renaissance, but like a boom.
It's a renaissance. Claim it's a renaissance.
A renaissance of technology and growth and just seeing new ways that people are adapting. So in terms of the people that you've been able to touch, especially in the city of Detroit, what would you say or your opinion about the next, like Steve Jobs coming out of Detroit or the next, you know what I mean?
Honestly, I think we probably already have a couple unicorns in the making. If you don't know, I'm going to just shout out a couple tech founders. Charisma Guilform, she actually uses AI so people can make their own customized jewelry. So creators can jump on and create their own jewelry store and customize it. She made all the jewelry for Black Panther 2. It's right here in Detroit founder. She's a plant on Michigan Avenue. Darren Riley at Just Air, they're building an air quality network for the whole county, which is about to be the largest air quality network owned by a county. It's a Black founder. Here in Detroit, he built it because the air pollution gave him asthma. And he was like, I should do something about this.
Yeah.
We just had one of our founders get a National Science Foundation grant, $300,000. I think there's less than like a handful of Black founders from Detroit who've actually gotten that. And he's on track to get to phase 2, which is another $1.2 million. And they've just been like blowing up, solving problems though that impact us, impact our health, impact our quality of life at home, and either help us make money or just build something new.
Yeah, I just love that the spread of love and the spread of knowledge about what's happening and Detroiters doing big things because Detroiters hustle harder. But Johnnie, I'm thinking about this upcoming Saturday, May 4th. May the 4th be with you. You have Blacks.
You get it. You get it. That's why we picked that one for this one.
Yay. So I'm thinking about this upcoming Saturday and all the things that you said. I saw a recent post you posted on Instagram, and it was community. I can't remember what it was, but at least
community wealth equals generational wealth.
I love that. So how are you going to take that into this Saturday?
Yes. So the speaker for this Saturday is actually David Tarver. Really interesting story about him. One, in the 90s, he built a telecom company, and when he sold it, he owned 98% of it, which is really unheard of when it comes to building and selling a venture, which means he kept most of the equity. He owned it. He also sponsored the scholarship that Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist used to go to U of M.
Oh.
So he is an amazing Black entrepreneur. He's written books. He's an author. His primary teaching is on urban entrepreneurship, how you can look at problems that are plaguing urban communities and build a company around that. And so he is a really good program and platform that teaches you how to do it. But he is like I think before all this tech boom, he's like, no, here's how we build it. He's an engineer. He's really good at identifying that problem. And as I'm seeing so many people who will walk into the room and like, I don't know what I wanted to build or not. Next meeting, I'm like, oh, they started a company. Actually, they got a lot of traction. So we're just bringing someone in the room who can do a little bit of that mentor advising energy and help show you the path of how to do it. I think we know how to hustle really hard in Detroit. We know how to create. David is going to help kind of connect those dots on how you do it and give you the follow-up training to build from there. He also teaches a whole course on this at U of M. So it's like really powerful to have someone who's done something so great and bring him in the room and like, look, we said May the 4th. Think of him as a little bit of your Jedi master on how to do this.
I was going to say Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yes.
But just building on that and just thinking about bringing someone like him in, bringing David in, and just talking about that generational wealth and health and knowledge and spreading that and passing it down. Just talk a little bit about that if we can. We're running up on time here, but just talk a little bit about that, just that passing down knowledge and wealth, how it helped just disperse throughout the community and other generations.
Yeah. Well, when we started Black Tech Saturdays, that has been the core. We have to share the code, share the game, and help make sure that everything that I know, if the community knows, that's going to be the fastest path to generational wealth. Watching a company go from zero to like revenue and funded in less than 6 months, that's because we shared enough wealth so somebody can do that when previously it used to take years. So it is humbly understanding that it's not about one of us winning. It's like, I want 1,000 people to win. In 2 years, we should see more Detroit tech entrepreneurs get to strides that they've never experienced before. And that's what success looks like for us. It has to be bigger than us individually, but about this whole community having the foundation it needs to grow.
I just love that. And I love that people in the city of Detroit are finding their community. They're finding their space, and they find a space in a place that's not necessarily, it's a competitive space. However, it's a competitive space that's allowing you to grow and become your own place and space.
Exactly.
And that is what we need to see more of. So, Johnnie, anything else you have for us about this upcoming Saturday?
Look, if you aren't already doing it, follow Black Tech Saturdays on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. You'll see more information. We do a really nice story rollout of what to expect, and you'll see a couple postings and how to RSVP.
Awesome. Johnnie Turnage is the co-founder and creator of Black Tech Saturdays. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro, chatting about this upcoming Saturday. And once again, may the 4th be with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. As that was Tia Graham, I'm Nick Austin, and maybe we could utilize some technology, some tech entrepreneurship to figure out what to do about warming that we're seeing here in the Great Lakes. Indeed, the amount of ice on the Great Lakes this winter was historically low at times. And tonight, Great Lakes Now on PBS will air an episode on the trend of our warming waters. WDET's Pat Batchelor recently spoke with Great Lakes Now host Anna Marie Seisling about Michigan's Great Lakes and what warming temperatures mean for Michiganders.
As daily average temperatures rise around the globe, the world's largest lakes all over are feeling the effects of climate change. We know that. But here in the United States, Lake Superior, which is, as I said, the largest in terms of surface area, deepest and coldest Great Lake, it's among the fastest warming of the large lakes here. So we're going to investigate the effects and the implications of the changing climate and the impact it's having on Lake Superior and the people who rely on it for both, fishing and recreation.
Well, give me an example of one of the ways it's being affected.
Sure. So we actually follow along with filmmaker John Shepard of Hamline University. So he actually has this larger documentary that's called The Sea Change for Superior. We kind of follow along with him and show some clips from his longer film. But one instance is this group of relay swimmers who have actually made it a point for the last few years now to swim all around Lake Superior to raise awareness about climate change. And that's something that they say, maybe years past would not have been possible, but the warming temperatures of the water is something that makes it a little bit more hospitable for them to be able to swim for as long as they do. And also, of course, ice fishermen, anglers. There are lots of anecdotes throughout the segment and throughout the longer film that explore what the warming waters mean for fishermen in the area as well.
When you talk about the Great Lakes, of course, we've dealt with invasive species for many decades, and there's one that has folks in Ontario concerned. What are we talking about there?
Yeah, this one's pretty wild. So there's an invasive species in Ontario that has wildlife experts kind of on high alert. So it's a marbled crayfish, and the marbled crayfish, it actually can clone itself. So in other words, it can reproduce asexually and can lay 500 eggs at a time. So it was actually really popular in the aquarium trade as both a pet and a fish food. But since 2022, it's been listed as a prohibited species under Ontario's Invasive Species Act, meaning that it could not be bought, sold, traded, or even kept in home aquariums. But still, that seems like it hasn't stopped the marbled crayfish from invading Ontario's waterways. So we take a look at the impacts of that and then also kind of explore some of the other invasive species that are threatening the Ontario ecosystem.
You also have a segment that you do every month called The Catch, which takes sort of a closer look at other things that are going on. What's on The Catch this month?
Yeah, so this month on The Catch, looking back at 2023, there were 13 shipwrecks discovered in Wisconsin's Lake Michigan waters, and that number blew away the previous record of just 4 discoveries set back in 2015. So we talked with a journalist who is sort of, exploring what some of the different factors are, or if it's just kind of coincidence that all of these shipwrecks were spotted in Wisconsin last year. So that's one of them. And then the other one is actually looking at this new film that Detroit PBS just recently did. It's called Ignore the Noise. It's going to be coming out here in the next few weeks, and it's actually looking at the revitalization of the city's waterfront all along the Detroit River. So we take a look at that, and then, of course, we also have Waves of Change, my environmental justice series that I do every month, and this time we talk with Gary Swick, who is an educator and longtime activist and advocate for Friends of the Fox River in Illinois.
That was Anna Marie Seisling speaking with Pat Batchelor about a new episode PBS is doing on climate change's impact on the Great Lakes. You can find episodes of Great Lakes Now at greatlakesnow.org.
This is the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. That was Nick Austin. I am Tia Graham. Just taking a look at the forecast. A chance of rain this evening, but we'll see some clouds. 78 degrees is a high today. Tomorrow, Tuesday, we'll see rain in the morning, but partly sunny conditions with a high around 72. And Wednesday, hump day, sunny with a high around 79 degrees. Looking pretty good for the rest of the week. Expect rain at the end of the week. However, coming up, we'll discuss the NFL draft and who the Detroit Lions selected this year. Are we winning a Super Bowl? I don't know. We'll figure it out. That's coming up. You all stay right there.
The 61st pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Ennis Rakestraw Jr., defensive back, Missouri.
That was Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan announcing the Detroit Lions' second-round draft pick on the Metro. Nick Austin is here. I'm Tia Graham. And if you were around Detroit this weekend, you know that everyone was talking about the draft. The event broke records for attendance as 775,000 people came to downtown Detroit. It was great just walking down Woodward Avenue in the middle of the street. However, the draft stole the show, and the Detroit Lions had some interesting selections. What should we make of the Detroit Lions' 6 picks? What might it mean for the team next season? To discuss this, we have Shawn Windsor here. He is a columnist and sports feature writer at Detroit Free Press. Shawn, welcome to the Metro.
Oh, thanks for having me, Nick and Tia.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here, especially because we'll treat you better than ML Elric, which I know you do co-hosting on ML Soul of Detroit also. So don't worry, you're in friendly territory.
Thank you. Co-hosting is probably a little strong with him. I mean, does anybody really ever co-host with him?
That's why we need you in there to keep them straight. So I appreciate that. But you were at the NFL draft. So before we get into the picks, can you just tell us your experience from being down there for the weekend?
Boy, I hate to disappoint you, but I was in Allen Park for 3 straight days. The teams. I know. I'm sorry. It's the team's headquarters.
But
right?
you're doing the real work then, because you're where the decisions were being made.
That's right. And the general manager, Brad Holmes, he comes and speaks to us after every pick, and so we were kind of bunkered in there. But I was downtown a little bit, so
okay.
Sorry about that.
No. Was it cool seeing everyone in the jerseys when they had all the same jerseys on?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I bet it was.
They wore Dan Campbell's number one of the nights, and then the first, I want to say it was the first night, Brad Holmes had T-shirts made up that were sort of a little bit of trash talking to some of the reaction he got last year during the draft, and it said "positional villain," which is a reference to kind of how you draft. So he likes to keep receipts and then pass them out at the opportune time.
Well, we know he's very competitive and got to be excited for this team. You mentioned that last year, right? Positional value. A lot of people tell you the running back position, not as valued, but he took it at a high spot. This year, everybody said we need to figure out how to defend the pass. We don't have enough defensive backs. He got 2 in the beginning of the draft. Let's start with your analysis. What can you tell us about these 2 cornerbacks we picked up, and do you think they'll be a good fit for the team?
Well, I do, and I here's the thing about the draft. To me, if you're hitting on, say, 50%, then you're doing a really good job. You're not going to hit on every pick. So he gets 2 cornerbacks, Terrion Arnold from Alabama, and then Ennis Rakestraw, I think we heard in the tease there, from Missouri. If one of those guys hits, then they're in good shape because they made some moves in the offseason with free agency. What I loved about Terrion Arnold, I don't know if you all saw this, but when he was introduced on the stage in front of, 275,000 people on Thursday night, he took the mic, turned around to Detroit, and said, "Y'all got a star." I mean, is that fabulous or what?
It is interesting being a team that players actually want to come to as opposed to avoiding at all costs. So, you mentioned also being in Allen Park. You mentioned this draft, this experience. What does it say? I shouldn't even ask you what it says about the culture here, but do you think that informed kind of the draft that the Lions had in terms of who they were deciding to pick?
For sure, to a degree. But getting back to your other question, the other point real quickly, with Terrion Arnold and Rakestraw and the way they reacted with the crowd, well, the way all the picks react, well, not all of them because they weren't all here, but the way those 2 guys reacted, and then we got to see them kind of in a Zoom setting from Allen Park over the next few days. They were so excited to come here, and I'm on Ross St. Brown, who just signed a big, well-deserved contract receiver for the Detroit Lions, talked about how different in just 3 years, how different it was when he was drafted. And he's like, "Oh boy, do I really have to go to the Lions?" To all these young guys saying, "Oh, I can't wait to get there and play for Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell."
Yeah, it's a big culture shift. One of the things that you saw, of course, you're being at Allen Park, is kind of that draft process. So before we get into more picks, I just think this is interesting. I mean, what is that even set up like? Can you explain to us, or for people who haven't seen it, what it's like in the war room and what these guys are doing for the NFL draft?
Well, Brad Holmes, the general manager, has his team, his front office team, not the whole coaching staff. Dan Campbell's in there. Sheila Hamp is in there, the owner. And by the way, I'm not sure she gets enough credit for the changes that she's made. When she took over, she realized there was kind of a cloud hanging over that building out in Allen Park, right? Just the way it functioned, the vibes, the way people interacted with each other. I'm not here to completely trash the previous regimes, but there were some issues. And she sensed that, being, I think, a pretty good understanding of human nature. And that's where the change really started. So just, giving her those props a little bit, because then she's the reason we have Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. But anyway, so he's got his staff in there. Campbell's in there. And, they're on the phone. They're wheeling and dealing. Holmes made 4 trades, right, through the draft to go up and get the guys he wanted. So they make the pick, and then they hug, and they slap tables, and they go crazy. And then they come down and talk to us a little bit about why they made the selections they did. So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, a lot of energy there. Let's get back to the draft, though. We already mentioned the first 2 picks. Anything else that happened in the draft that really stuck out to you? And what's your overall grade for the selections?
Oh, that's a good question. It's always so hard to say. I'm not much of a grader without I have some colleagues that love to pass out grades, and they're more in the speculation business. I'd give them at least a B, right? Yeah. I mean, and who knows if the cornerbacks hit, then they get an A. There were a few stories that stuck out to me. One, they traded up to get a very, very large human being who grew up in Tonga, moved as an early teenager to Vancouver, right outside Vancouver, played football for the University of British Columbia, kind of off the radar. He's Giovanni Manu is his name, and he's about 6'8", 350 pounds, was a basketball player. I'm a basketball guy. I love basketball. And so when somebody's that big and they can still jump, I think he has like a 35, 36 vertical leap. He's ran a fairly fast 40 for his size, so there's some athleticism there. He's raw, but he's an interesting developmental project to me. And with the track record that Holmes has, it might be kind of fun to see this guy turn into something down the road. But I like the way he talked. Panay Sewell, who's an offensive lineman already, who's a star player for the Lions, has the sort of the Polynesian background. He grew up in an island not too far from Tonga, and so he's really looking forward to being mentored by him. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, no, that is cool. Those communities, those relationships, of course, relationships and teamwork on the field are very important. We do know historically not all of these draft picks, as you mentioned, are going to hit, right? It can be a little hit or miss, especially as you get further down. But what we're really thinking about is what these guys can contribute to the team moving forward, right? Just missing the Super Bowl last year has a lot of people thinking. T even mentioned it in the beginning. Hey, could it be Super Bowl this year? Before we get to that prognostication, what kind of impact do you think these rookies, these draft picks can have, and how does it change the outlook for the Lions this season?
I really think it's about the two cornerbacks at the top. I'm not sure how much time anybody else is going to get. Maybe a defensive tackle they got out of LSU, Mekhi Wingo, he could maybe be in the rotation. They also have an offensive guard from Boston College. What's his name? Christian Mahogany.
That's the one, yes.
And a lot of people thought that he fell several rounds. So, those big boys get hurt from time to time, right? Yeah. And it's just part of the game. So maybe Mahogany gets in there and gets a rotation. We saw a rookie lineman last year get some minutes, Sorsdahl for the Lions. So, but I would say at the top, Terrion Arnold and Rakestraw, those two I think can have the biggest immediate impact. I mean, they were 4 points from the Super Bowl, right? Yeah. One more pass deflection, anything. It's just so close. Force one punt in the second half. Yeah. Because you got tight coverage.
Yeah. Well, one position they did not work on doing anything at was kicker, which we know has been an issue for the team. A lot of people looking in the same building at the Michigan Panthers. I think you can't talk to their kicker right now because the season's still going on and tampering. But have you heard anything about what they're trying to do with special teams and kicker?
It'd probably have to be in free agency. We kind of wondered if they would look in the draft, but obviously they didn't. On the other hand, does Dan Campbell really want a kicker?
Right. It's just an excuse for him to go on it at fourth down as much as possible.
You feel like, why not? I mean, there are 4 downs. Use them. I mean, this is his philosophy.
Oh, you can't take the downs back with you. You might as well spend them.
Might as well.
I know. But by the way, are you guys Lions?
Oh, 100%. I can't help but be a fan.
And what do you think of Dan Campbell? Because
passion. I love his passion. I love his energy. I love his fight. I love that he is a all or nothing type of guy. You either love him or you don't. And I just think his all or nothing attitude, like I said, you either love it or you don't. I love it. And I think it's just so Detroit to just go hard and hustle hard for something. And he has that mentality. And so does the player. Terrion Arnold, watching him do that on the stage, I can't wait to see him and Amon-Ra St. Brown on the sidelines dancing and having a good time. So I'm excited about this.
No, for sure, and you hear that about Campbell Weber, and these players want to play for him.
Yeah,
and he's very Detroit, isn't he?
Yes.
He really is. So is Holmes.
Yeah,
and together they have this kind of thing. But Rakestraw, real quickly, the second cornerback selected, he had an interesting little backstory. He was at a camp with some other players, got invited and didn't get in. Didn't get invited, didn't get in, was sat at the gate, cried on the way back with his mom, and said, that's never going to happen to me again.
Yeah.
That's the kind of guys the Lions like.
All right. Well, Shawn, Windsor, we like you here as well. Thanks for joining us on the Metro, sports writer for the Detroit Free Press. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Metro, Monday, April 29th. You can listen to recent episodes online at WDET.org.
Shows produced by Sam Corey, David Lyons, and Jack Phil Brandt, and our engineer is Nate Bender.
Yes, this is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. The Metro is a production of WDET, listener-supported service of Wayne State University. You can support the Metro online at WDET.org/donate.
Have a good one.
WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM is offering a new master's degree in ethical leadership focused on sustainable, ethical, and inclusive problem solving. More information at business.udmercy.edu.